Pitt got exposed. I think we can all admit that. They hadn't played a top 30 team yet. I thought they were better than this. I thought Eli Holstein was on his way to being a star quarterback. And I don't really care about last year. I don't rate Pitt in reference to last year. Last year was a complete disaster, inexcusable for this point in the Pat Narduzzi era to even have a season like that. I'm certainly not going to give them the benefit of measuring this season off that season. It reminds me of the Pirates. Well, they improved from 40 wins to 55. Aren't they great? No, because they had 40 last year. That's why. They don't get the benefit of me saying how much better they are coming off an inexcusably embarrassing season that never should have happened. Not to mention the fact that college football is fantasy football, basically, in how they build their teams. One year has very little to do with the previous year. This is a new team, new quarterback, new lot of things, and I was wrong about Holstein, unfortunately, because I'm not seeing it.
I don't know that you can say you're wrong.
You think he's going to be a star? I thought he would be a star.
I think he's regressed. He's only a redshirt freshman. So, therefore, I would say to you, be patient. If you look at Kenny Pickett's curve to where he was at the beginning to where he was at the end, took some time for him to get to that point. And I think in this case, it will. Now, if he decides to move on.
I know, but Bob, that took 9 years. Pickett was 36 by the time he left Pitt. I'm thinking that Holstein.
But I think Holstein is a kid who just needs more time. He is, to me, regressed, but I think the whole offense has regressed, or other teams have started to figure out their tendencies and really made it hard for them.
Yeah.
But they haven't, going to SMU, you'd have to score points. You knew that going in. And last I saw the game before they got two insignificant scores, it was 48-11.
Yeah.
They did not do much at all.
No, it was graphic and blatant what was happening there. And then
But then the question with them is, and you may say this is stupid to ask because they play two ranked teams, although one of them just got clobbered at home, Clemson, by the team who's now ranked, Louisville.
Right.
They have these games left. If they win out, what happens to Pitt? And where would they figure? Because tomorrow is not only election day, but it's the NFL trade deadline, but it's the first day we see college football rankings based on what we may look at as a possible field of 12.
Yeah, but that's a good question. If Pitt were to win out, what would their fate be? I don't think they'd be in the ACC championship, would they?
I don't know.
I mean, I still think it would be.
With all these new teams, I'm not sure how they set that up.
Here's my question, and nobody can answer it, and I apologize for my ignorance. Would a two-loss SMU team, is it possible for them to get into the ACC championship over Pitt?
A two-loss
or a
SMU.
Two-loss
if Pitt wins out, you're talking about.
Yeah. It's based on the rankings, correct?
I think so, yes. And they're going to come up with their own rankings. It's not the rankings you've seen so far. So what we'll see tomorrow is different.
Right.
But, yeah, it will depend on where they're ranked. And here's the biggest question to me is how many ACC teams are going to be afforded versus the Big Ten? Because Indiana's still undefeated. They gouged Michigan State.
Yeah,
they have a chance to go against Ohio State undefeated.
I think Indiana might win that game.
And if they do, how many ACC or Big Ten teams are there? Because Oregon's definite, probably the at-large.
Ohio State, Oregon,
and would you put
Penn State,
Indiana?
You
take
if
four.
They have to go if they keep winning.
You would take 4 over.
Well, Indiana might be second on that list if they beat Ohio State.
And Penn State has the same situation Pitt does. They could win out and find themselves in a playoff potentially, which would make those who want James Franklin to be fired maybe reconsider if he gets in and wins a game.
Well, let's talk about that in a second. Just to finish up on Pitt. I don't think we're going to have to worry about that. I think they'll beat Virginia. Clemson is now a toss-up. We were all dreaming of a top 10, maybe top 5 Clemson and a top 12 Pitt team. Look how far SMU went from 20, I think, to what, 13?
13.
Yeah. What would Pitt have done with a convincing win or any kind of win? I don't know, but then you got to go at Louisville and at the Fighting Bill O'Briens, and while they've had struggles, I'm not counting on anything now from Pitt. I think they're probably a 3-loss team, maybe a 2-loss team. Maybe a nice season, but considering the schedule, it's kind of the least they could do, honestly. They haven't even played a top 30 team until SMU, according to Sagarin's rankings.
That's why this was a big weekend. They finally had a chance on a big stage to take their story to the national consumer.
And that's how it works.
Football, and say, if you have this chance, you do it. And if you do it, all of a sudden now you're moving up quickly.
That's how it works.
Yeah,
it's well, I was going to say it's college sports. It's pro sports. That's how it works. You win, you keep winning, you get all the adulation and everything else and the rewards that come with winning, and you go to a place on a national stage and come up with a performance like that, and you get all the criticism. That's just the way it works. And I feel like I was wrong about Holstein, unfortunately. It doesn't mean he's a bad player. Doesn't mean he's a bad player. I thought they had an emerging star. Like Bob, we were talking about him as a potential Heisman candidate. He was on some people's Heisman lists early, and now it would appear that was more a function of the opponents than anything else.
True.
Doesn't mean he's a bad player.
It's also, we overreact to a lot of things week to week, and that's just how this is, which is interesting and fun at the same time. But I think you have to be patient with young kids, and he's still a redshirt freshman. Now, I think the bigger question is for him, since we're on him, what happens if this season just sort of falls off and it's not what you thought it might be?
Yeah.
Does he remain here? Because there was talk midway through the season, like, okay, this guy's going to price himself out of Pitt because we are dealing with professional sports now. So what happens? Does he stay? He would be best inclined to stay, I think, with a year under his belt to stay here. Be only 2 years here. He still has more time after that if he's
best inclined to stay versus the pros or another college program.
Another college. I'm talking.
I'm not prepared to say that. He may, because now I'm starting to wonder about Cade Bell a little bit. After this offense went crazy, they just haven't been good now for 3 weeks in a row. So are people starting to figure that out? I don't know. I'm in a holding pattern with Pitt. To me, in a way, the juicier story here is Penn State. And the James Franklin situation limits. You were there. I know you have some strong feelings. You're a Penn State guy? Is that right or no?
Yeah. I mean, I also support Pitt. People think that that's like illegal to do, but I don't really care. I'm getting my master's from Penn State. I was at the game. And it was the third game I've been to this year. And it's just the same exact thing, Joe, that we've seen time after time with James Franklin in big games. They beat the teams you expect Penn State to win, but they can't beat the teams when they're underdogs. Franklin is now 1-9 against Ohio State, 1-14 against the top 5, 3-18 against top 10 teams, and he's 1-7 at home against teams ranked in the top 10. I mean, it's just unacceptable at this point. And it just seems like we're seeing the same thing over and
we're
over
sitting here
again.
We're sitting here again talking about the same thing.
Because you always think, and they're the higher ranked team than Ohio State. It's at home. Sure, it's a noon game, whatever. But, I mean, you have a quarterback who everybody thinks is better than Will Howard, and it's Howard that steals the show.
Yeah, I was wrong about him too, Bob. My quarterback rating system needs some corrections here. This was a big day for Drew Aller, and a lot of people telling me, it wasn't his fault. Well, if that's the best thing, see, I rate quarterbacks and goalies kind of the same. If the best thing you can tell me is he wasn't that bad or it wasn't his fault, that's the lowest of compliments. If he wasn't good, I'll tell you that much. Let me present this to you with a Penn State fan I know, Bob,
okay.
And then I'll turn the stage over to you. I said, basically, if the idea is to win a national championship, how much longer can you go with this? How much longer? He said, here's my Franklin take, which is subject to change. How many programs would I rather trade places with for the past decade? Bama, Georgia, OSU, Clemson, Oklahoma, Michigan, maybe. So Penn State is 6th or 7th. And that's with the 3rd and 6th place programs in your own division for a lot of that time. So who are you going to hire that's going to lead a top 5 program in the country? I'm not against getting someone who'll be better. Just don't know who that would be. But I'd also say a playoff loss where we're favored would sway me. To me, that's the story. The upshot of all of this is that if James Franklin gets in the playoff and loses in the first round, especially as a favorite, I think it's time to move on.
I would concur, and that's what I was saying at the beginning. I think this season is far from over. I think if you're in this situation and he can somehow get this team back to winning, I don't care that they're unranked teams. They have 4 of them, 2 home, 2 away. If they could win those games, get themselves in a playoff, and win a playoff game, it would change the viewpoint of a lot of people.